your first steps in writing a four-part chorale texture should always be adding the bass and soprano, especially if the Roman numerals are already provided for you, which they are in this example. So we'll go through just sort of the basic steps that you might take in order to do this. Now, just remember, this is essentially writing something relatively original. This is composition. And so some of the choices we'll go through right now may not be your choices, but I will talk through and see and show you why we made these choices and what the best approaches might be. So first off, you're always going to start with the bass line. Even if the Roman numerals, in this case, because the Roman numerals are provided for you, it just makes sense. Because the bass line, the Roman numerals are going to dictate what the bass line is going to be. And you'll notice all these Roman numerals have no BPS, have no figured bass symbols on them. So we know these are all root position. So in this case, it's as simple as adding the bass notes as shown by the Roman numerals. So we have a one chord, and the only decision you need to make is which octave. I would recommend maybe being on the lower side, in essence, making sure that it's low enough so that it doesn't get in the way of the tenor line. Because remember, the bass line is much freer, and a lot of the rules that you would apply to soprano, alto, and tenor don't necessarily or at least don't as consistently apply to the bass line. So they can be further away in terms of spacing. It will tend to leap a little bit more, etc., etc. And in this case, you'll see that. So we're in the key of C major, which I didn't actually write here. So we're going to make sure that we know the key. We're in the key of C major, and we're going to go ahead and follow this. So the one chord in C major, root position, is a C, followed by a four chord, which is an F as the root, followed by a two chord, which has D as the root, followed by a five chord, which has G. Now I can go with that higher G or lower G. Let's keep it low just to, or actually, you know what, just so that we have a better contour. Let's do the higher one, just so that way we have this pattern of going up, going down, going up. And then we'll end with the lower C for the last one chord. So we end and start on the same pitch. So you'll notice, very simple. That was really easy to add because the Roman numerals already show it. Typically, these are all going to be stem down in this case. So let's go ahead and make sure they're all stemmed down because it is the bass line. You will eventually put the tenor line there. So the other thing is making sure that you put all the notes of that voice first. So we did all of the bass notes first instead of doing bass note, then adding tenor, then adding soprano, alto, etc. We do all the notes for each voice. And you'll see this will help prevent a lot of the common issues and errors that occur. And it makes it easier to check for things like parallels and direct octaves and illegal parallels, rather, and direct octaves and that sort of thing. And it will help improve the elimination of spacing errors and incorrect notes by doing it this way. So second pitch we'll add is a soprano. And this we can have a little bit more freedom to this. We just need to make sure it fits in each chord. Now, there are several ways that you could approach this. I'm going to actually start by doubling the root right off the bat. I like having the space be up and below and above the soprano pitch to give me a little bit of freedom of contour, but I could have easily started on the G or the E. E is a little low. Maybe I could have done the higher E. But we're going to go with the C just to keep it simple. And it just kind of depends on what you want to do. So we're going to keep it very simple and not move if we don't have to. And eventually you'll want to be able to move around. But by starting from the point of absolute simplicity, not moving if you don't need to move. If you do have to move, move by step. And then if you have to move by step, if you can't move by step, leap by a third, keeping it as simple as possible. So it's almost incredibly boring to sing, and that's okay to start with. In fact, that's what you want to do because this is something brand new for most of you. So we don't need to change pitch, so we're going to keep the C right there. And then we're going up to D. We're going to a two chord, so we can't stay with C, so let's move up by step to D. That's the simplest thing to do. And we can do a couple things. If we wanted to make it more interesting, we could put the leading tone in there, the B, which is the leading tone, and make that a more complete chord, or we can stay the course and keep the same pitch, the D. Either one is fine. Let's, just for simplicity's sake, let's keep the same pitch, and then we'll finish up with a C as well. Now, this is not a direct octave, even though it's moving in the same direction, because it is a step in the soprano and a leap in the bass. If this was a a leap in the bass and a leap in the soprano, or a step in the bass and a leap in soprano, that would be a direct octave. Since if it's moving in similar motion, but we're moving in similar motion with a step in the soprano, so that's totally fine. So this would be one example and one perfectly fine addition of a bass and a soprano off of the Roman numerals that are provided. So simplicity's sake, keeping it almost boring and adding these will make it much easier for you to check. So it's easier for you to check between soprano and alto, soprano and bass. Things like parallels and direct octaves and direct fifths. Direct octaves and direct fifths, again, only happen in the outer voices. But parallels will happen between all the voices. But by writing all the notes of each particular voice, all the soprano notes at once, all the bass notes at once, you have an easier time of making sure that you're not doing any weird leaps. You're keeping it as simple, and you can constantly compare between each every time you add a note with the other voice, which you know the other voice that you put down is already really well written. So it has fewer factors to deal with and makes it easier to check for errors. So there are no spacing errors because we don't deal with spacing errors when it comes to bass and soprano. When it's just those two pitches, there are no parallels because we able to check individually. No direct octaves, no incorrect notes. These are all the notes that fit in, and that makes it nice and simple. So that's how it works for adding bass and soprano. And then we'll take a look also adding, once we have a bass and soprano, adding the alto and tenor voices.